we're going into.
How you doing? My name is Aaric Hopkins. I'm going to inform y'all about transmissions. There are 3 different things that make a vehicle run. Let me start by asking y'all, how many of y'all drive, or have y'all ever driven a vehicle before? Okay. Most of y'all drive automatics, right? I can assume that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to give y'all a rundown on my topic, which is geared towards the transmission. For the most part, driving isn't difficult. It's just individuals that make it difficult. We can all agree on that. Simply put, a transmission allows power to be sent from a power source, most often an engine or a motor, to a driving mechanism. It uses gears and a clutch to convert the speed and power into torque. What I'm going to do is I'm going to explain the standard shift or manual first, because you can backtrack, and the standard shift and the manual, and the standard shift and the automatic, they work hand in hand, but they're just 2 different entities. In the case of a manual transmission, the flywheel, which is connected to the crank of the engine, runs at a constant speed. Through the use of operating clutch and a shifter, engine power is reduced and increased significantly through the engagement and disengagement of a series of larger and smaller gears. Now, I don't know if y'all know what a picture of a transmission looks like, but this top picture shows the picture of the actual transmission in the intervals. This right here, circle part, which is the difference between the automatic and the standard, is we call this our torque converter, which is really this item right here broken down, which also shows you your clutch assembly, which is in a standard shift you only have 1, but in automatics, depending upon what the speed is, like for example, most standard shifts have, we'll say, a 6-speed, which is gear setup, and you have an automatic, you'll have a 4-speed or a 5-speed, which utilizes 4 and 5 of these. Yeah. In standard shift, you have a clutch pedal, which is part of this clutch assembly deal. It's a disengaged pedal. You have the brake, and you have the gas pedal. In a standard shift, what you normally want to do is in automatics, you start with you have the lower gears 1, 2, then drive, then neutral, then reverse. Well, the thing is, in standard shift, what you want to do is, I'm going to use my hands because you can't see my feet, but I'm going to use my hands. You have the clutch. The clutch is really your key factor in the standard shift. You put the vehicle in first gear, because usually your gear ratio is set up this way. Usually your gear ratio is set up that way. You have first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. Depends on foreign or domestic vehicles, reverse is going to be on the right side or on the left side. Now, here's the thing about standard. Just like automatics, they have locks where you can't start out and drive and go into reverse while you're driving. In a standard shift, there's a lock inside the gearbox itself, whereas if you get the 6th gear, you won't ever go to reverse, or if you're in first gear, you won't miss and go to reverse. What you want to do is, when you first start your vehicle up, automatics, you just put the key in ignition, crank it, vehicle starts up, vehicle's in park, you're done, and you just distribute between park, reverse, or drive, whichever one you want to go. Well, the same way it's like that in the standard shift, but only difference is you're using a clutch. What you do is you put the clutch in, start the car, ease off the clutch, the vehicle's automatically going to be in, well, it depends on what gear you leave it in. If you leave it in neutral, there's 2 ways to put the car in the vehicle in neutral in a standard shift. Disengaging the clutch by putting the clutch all the way down to the floor, that's neutral, or leaving it in the middle, which is if you're on the paper, it'll show you the middle point between the gears, between first and second, or third and fourth, and so on. Now, what you want to do in order to drive it, because it's a system, that's the purpose of me showing you your transmission and the torque converter. When you press the clutch in, the vehicle started, you're in first gear, you put the vehicle in first gear. Now, you can move the shifter without pressing the clutch, but I wouldn't recommend do that because 2 reasons. It puts strain on the transmission, and second, you strip the gears. When you strip the gears, you grind the gears, and you disrupt the brake pedals that are inside the clutch assembly itself, causing complete failure. When you engage the clutch, you slowly ease off the clutch while giving it gas. It's equal pressure. This is the gas pedal, this is the clutch assembly. slowly ease off the clutch as the clutch, because I'm going to tell you, this is the clutch and this is the engine. The tube that connects the engine to the transmission. The clutch is unlocking those gears and it's allowing you to turn as you're easing off. That way you can control the RPMs better when you get a gas and the car get rolling. Now for beginners, beginner drivers who have the experience with an automatic vehicle, which I wouldn't recommend driving a standard if you're a first time driving a vehicle. That's where you really mess up. In order to drive a standard, you have to have an understanding of how the transmission, how the vehicle you're driving skills. Now for beginner drivers, if they don't feel comfortable, because the clutch, it depends on what kind of vehicle you drive. Sometimes the clutch can be heavy, sometimes it's light. Usually heavier clutches, what you want to do is, you don't apply no gas. It depends on how strong your foot is, but your foot will get used to it, your left foot. Because I know how often do we drive with our left foot and never really. So when you engage the clutch, if you ease up real slowly, the clutch is going to find that pivot point where you can be in between going forward and just not moving at all. And as you ease off, the car starts rolling. Once the car starts rolling, you can kind of ease off the clutch. One of the biggest things most people will do, or individuals will do, is they'll ease off the clutch too quickly with no gas. The car goes dead. That's what you call a stall. That's why most people, if you see it in whether you see it in movies or other friends, oh, I stalled in traffic. That's because you got off the clutch too quickly or you dispensed too quickly. It's best to use comfortable shoes. I never understood why individuals drive with boots and other shoes. If you have a shoe with a feel in it where you can feel, because you have to know your vehicle. And it's better that way, so you don't have to keep stalling, because when you're driving in traffic, or if you're in moderate traffic or at a stoplight, there are other individuals that are impatient. They don't know what your circumstances are. It's the fact that the light is green, it's time to go. And if you stall, it's like, what just happened? Your whole world is shook upside down. It comes. Yeah, that's how it works. But offhand, I prefer the driver standard shift. The reason why is because when you're driving a standard shift vehicle, your awareness, it really goes through the roof, especially when it comes to driving. I believe that if more people drove standard shift cars, it would kind of, in a way, reduce accidents. But then again, the knife does cut both ways, because it also depends on that individual. Because most people, your awareness is really 45 to 50%, but in the standard shift in driving, it increases to about 90, 99. Because you can't eat, you can't put the makeup on. You need both your hands. Especially if you, the reason why I use that is, that's like if you know, have y'all ever watched like racing movies and you see guys that are doing this all fast? Yeah, I know it's a movie, but that's pretty much the basic concept. In most standard shift vehicles, they're going to be a little bit quicker. I'm speaking for the old generation of vehicles. They didn't convert until roughly 2005. Any vehicle that's under that model or under that year, they're easier to drive. But now with these computers and technology, is it's kind of like, well, if we want to keep the standard shift or remove the clutch, or do we want to keep it retro? I mean, that's what they're kind of fighting as. I believe they shouldn't change it. I believe that you should be the driver. Don't let the vehicle drive you. You drive the vehicle. That's the way I see things. Because in automatics, you throw it in gear and it's like you get up and go and you're always multitasking, which you shouldn't be doing. But we're only human. We do it regardless. So you say no, that means yes, we're still going to do it regardless. The only downfall to a standard is, which I've been in this in many occasions, whereas standstill traffic, stop and go traffic, that is a huge disadvantage for a standard shift. One, because it puts strain on the transmission, disengaging the clutch back and forth, or cheat and leave it in the second gear. Sometimes you can have a pass gear where you can leave it in second or third, but I wouldn't recommend it because you're still putting strain on the transmission. But when you're sitting in traffic, automatic, all you're doing is using the brake. Okay, that's fine, and maybe give it some gas to get up and go. But in the standard shift, you have to use the brake, disengage the clutch, then get off the brake, and then, in between the clutch and the gas pedal, and that puts a lot of strain on your left foot, especially if it's stop and go traffic. Another disadvantage is when you're on an incline or a hill, if you don't know the pressure point between in the clutch where you can to go and not to go, because automatically if you put the clutch in, that's your neutral point. The vehicle's gonna roll back. Unlike automatics, if it's in drive and you have your foot on the brake, it'll hold. But if you're at a stoplight, most of the times your foot's on the brake pedal, right? Well, on a standard shift, it depends. If you're on a flat plane, my foot isn't on the brake pedal. I'm not used to putting my foot on the brake pedal. I've been, well, for that nature, I've been rear-ended a couple of times because of that, because the human eyes, they don't see things as quickly as efficiently. If we see red, that means stop. If we see a car that doesn't have red lights, that means, okay, now it's time to stop. But at that point, you're already in the back seat of that vehicle, so it's no point in that. Just offhand, cars need transmissions because of the physics of the gasoline for the engine. First, an engine has to redline a maximum RPMs above which the engine cannot go without exploding. Second, if you read how horsepower works, whether it's performance or diesel trucks or any other type of vehicle, commercial, you would notice that the engine has a narrow range of RPMs for that horsepower for it to get the maximum, which is called torque. The engine may produce a maximum horsepower at 5,500 RPMs. For y'all don't understand what RPMs are, it's the gauge that's, the single gauge is 1, 2, 3. Those are your maximum RPMs. Most vehicles may produce the maximum RPMs of, we'll say 6,000 RPMs, but you won't shift at 6,000 RPMs. I'm saying from a standard point of view. You won't shift at 6,000 RPMs. It's to get great, efficient, fuel economy, you would want to shift between 3,400 and 4,000 to save on gas mileage. That's why most standard shift vehicles, actually 90% standard shift vehicles, get better gas mileage than automatics. A huge advantage to a standard shift is, like I said, I drive a sports car. I used to drive a sports car, and I drive a standard version. And the people I affiliate with drive the automatic version. Some of them drive standard, but the ones that drive the automatic version, the price to build a racing transmission for that standard sports car I drive is $600 to $800. The same transmission, but for an automatic for that same vehicles, is $6,000 to $7,000. Now, to get a regular transmission, that's $6,000 to $7,000. A regular transmission for an automatic for that same vehicle is $5,000. A regular transmission for my car in the standard shift is $200 from the $600. You kind of do the math. So, do you want to sit in traffic and disengage or save gas mileage, or you want to go ahead and drive an automatic and eventually? And then the crazy part is, automatic, you have to check the transmission fluid. Standard shift, when you go off and get your oil, transmission fluid, unless you have a leak in the standard, unless you have leaks, then your fluid the fluid level really doesn't change. It gets hot, but doesn't overheat like automatics, and it's just such an inconvenience, in my opinion. If there are any questions in regards to the transmission?